In this video, we're going to show how to open up a switch so we can clean it internally, and then we'll get to the external cleaning after that. Obviously, with every networking switch, which is what we're concentrating on today, you have screws on the sides, and you generally have screws in the back of the switch. The front generally never has any screws or anything for you to, play around with, simply because it's the port side of the switch, and that's where the front panel is. So there's nothing for you to open up there. All you're doing is you're opening up screws on the sides and then the back. Generally, for the sides, a lot of times it is a Phillips head. So all you do is you use your toolbox right here to find the right bit. You attach it to your drill, you attach it to your screwdriver simply, and you open it up. So it's not a very complex procedure. As you can see here, I'm gonna make this a little easier and turn it like this. We're gonna make sure we're in the right setting here. There we go. And there it is. So you can just simply open it up. You always want to have a little tray to be able to collect all your screws, so that way you don't lose them. So every single technician will have the tool set, they'll have their trays in order to make sure they put all the screws in it at the time of cleaning and opening up a switch for whatever reason it is they're opening it up for. In the back, it's a different bit, so we're just going to switch that up quite easily and find the right bit for it in our toolbox, which is this guy right here. And then we're just going to open these guys up. Really simple. With certain switches, especially the newer ones, you also have screws on the tops as well in these areas all around the side. So obviously you can all you do is you use common sense to see where the screws are, and because you're basically trying to remove this top chassis off the switch. So with every switch it might be a little bit different, but it's all very simple, because you just look and see where the screws are, what it is that's attaching the top chassis to the rest of the switch, and that's what you're opening up. So now here we've got all the screws, as you can see, all opened up. The ones on the side are all opened up, and the one on the back is all opened up. So at this point, all you need to do is you need to pop the chassis off the switch. Sometimes they do get stuck, so you're just gonna have to give it a little muscle, and she'll pop right out. As you can see, she's opened up now because there's a gap, and this allows you to simply pop the cap off, or pop the chassis off the switch, and now you can see what the internal part of the switch looks like. Obviously, as you can see, there's quite a bit of dirt in here, and this is what you're trying to dust off. And this is your fan. This is what turns, and this is generally what collects a ton of dust and a ton of dirt, because obviously it's constantly sucking air out and in, essentially. And then this is your power supply here. As you can see, you're able to remove this little protector cap, and this is what your power supply looks like. This is an older guy, so it's got a much bigger internal power supply. You can see there's quite a bit of dirt just all around this thing. That's been accumulated from years of sitting in some data center or some server room, basically. And that's pretty much it. At this point in time, you can probably proceed to air this out. You can use your air hose here, which we have, and then you'll just use that. And when we go to do this in a real live scenario, you'll be doing this in our little contained air booth, which we have. It's a dust booth, so that area is specifically meant for you to be dusting off equipment for refurbishing and cleaning. You do not, under any circumstance, want to do this out in the open, which is where I am right now. This is just for demonstration purposes, because you can't really video in the booth right now.
And currently there's no employees working.
And there's no employees working right now. It's an off day here, as well as, again, we can't really video the booth, so we're going to have to show this thing on a one-time basis to you guys out in the open. But again, this is something that we never ever do out in the open. This always gets done in a contained area, which we have a specific area for, and again, it's that containment booth that we have for dusting. Another thing you want to be incredibly aware of is you got to make sure you have all the protective gear when you're dusting any kind of an equipment. That includes obviously having the right gloves on. You want to make sure you've got safety glasses on, because dust can go in your eyes. All kinds of particles can just fly all over and go in your eyes. And obviously the most important is probably your dust mask. You're dealing with dust. And at the end of the day, even though you're in a containment booth, you still want to make sure you're extra protected. And even though you're working within a contained facility and a contained booth to do this, you still want to make sure you've got your dust mask on. It's imperative that you do that no matter what. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my little dust mask on here, and I'm going to do a quick little demo on what this basically looks like, right? And you want to make sure you pinch the dust mask to make sure that it's essentially covering your entire nose, and it's not really allowing for anything to come in, because you don't want any of this stuff to come in. So simple. You've got your air hose gun. You've got obviously air in it. So we also have brushes as well. So if there's certain things here and there that are kind of harder to get off with just the air alone, you just use your brush to do that. Pretty, again, simple. These are all tools that are provided to every single employee that's in charge of this part of the operation, the cleaning, refurbishing part. From that point on, again, it's very simple. I mean, I'm not going to use a lot of air with this one because we don't want to spread too much pressure on. But all you do is you
And make sure you're keeping the nozzle no closer than 2 inches from the contacts.
So you don't want to be too close to your motherboard. Obviously, these are fairly sensitive, parts and equipment that you're working with. So if you blow that air far too close to the motherboard, you might be able to, or you might end up damaging some of the
electronics.
Some of the electronics and some of the chips that are already welded on here. And these are all, as you can see, these are micro welded, which means that the welding is very, very sensitive, so they're not going to withstand too much force. You want to be careful. You want to hold it, like I said, at the very, at the very sort of closest, at about 2 inches here. If you can, go even higher up. If it's too dirty, you go up about 2 inches, but no more, no closer than that, essentially, is what you want to kind of keep in mind. You've got your fan here. A lot of times a good trick to dust out a fan, in order not to have something like this where it starts turning and spreading the air around, is you want to kind of put your finger on it. Very simple. Hold it. The fan that way. Power supply, you don't have to really worry about that here because everything is stationary and static, right? So you just kind of pretty straightforward. And then once you're done cleaning the inside of the chassis, or the switch, if you will, to our standard, which again means that you're not going to have too much dirt lying around. Again, this is all for demonstration purposes, so we're not going to go and thoroughly clean this. But once you're done with that, then what you want to kind of look into is, once you turn the switch around, this is where you kind of start getting all the ports. This is all the inputs. And in just about every switch, you're always going to have a ton of dirt and dust and all sorts of things going into these guys, because they're exposed, generally speaking, a lot of times when they're in server rooms, so they get a lot of garbage into them. So another thing that you obviously want to do is you want to make sure you dust out the front as well. And one important part of actually dusting out, or remembering to dust out the front too, is the fact that a lot of times if there's too much dust built up, and if there's too much garbage out in these ports, when you plug a Cat 5 or a Cat 6 or whatever it is in, and you may not get the connection, simply because the dust is interfering. These are very sensitive pins that get connected to the pins that are within your Cat 5 cable, whatever cable you're putting in there. So if it's too dirty, a lot of times you may not even pick up a signal and not be able to transfer. Or if you do transfer, you may not be able to transfer to its full maximum potential. So if it's a 1 gig port, you may not be able to get all 1 gigs out of it, because there's certain things that are interfering with it in terms of dust and dirt that's in there. So you want to make sure you get the front quite well. Again, we do have certain brushes. We got smaller sort of micro brushes that you can use if there's certain dirt in there that the air isn't getting out by itself. You can just go in there with a brush and brush it all out too.
So do a visual examination, make sure the ports are clean. If not,
right.
and the compressed air is not helping, then you can use your micro brush, get all the
Exactly.
remaining dust.
If you look at this right now, if you kind of zoom in, you can see the ports in here are fairly clean now, and you can tell because again, all it takes is a visual look inside, and you can see if there's too much dirt. You'll notice this, as you can see, has been cleaned up quite nicely. What you also get sometimes as well with certain switches, you'll get ports which you can see have certain oxidization damages in there. So they've been rusted because these are all metal in there. These pins are all metal. So if somebody doesn't take care of them properly, there's too much humidity in the air where they're installed and they're not in a controlled data center. A lot of times you will get switches that have oxidization. Those switches, we generally put them into quarantine sort of section of our warehouse, at which point we decide whether to salvage and recycle these or if there's a way we can fix it.
We'll have a bin labeled as failed switches, and all the equipments that are rusted typically will go into failed switches.
Because that will sometimes, again, this is when you, at this point, you send those into testing because you want to do a full-on load test on this switch and make sure that it is able to do what it is that it is capable of doing to begin with. And if it does, then you can tell the rest is just aesthetic and it isn't actually affecting the function. But if it is affecting your function and you're not getting certain throughputs or you're not even getting a connection, that means the rust obviously has done its job and it's destroyed the switch. So that's a recycling switch. And that's it.
And that's the video for internal cleaning of the switch.